And what's going on, Los Angeles, LAFB fam, Bruin Nation? How we doing? Your dynamic duo back together again, the Thriller and Madman, for all of your UCLA football needs. And we got a great show here talking about a new committee that's been formed for the new head coach. Really excited to get into that. And then, of course, previewing the Northwestern game. My goodness, we finally have another game. It's felt like 2 years since we've been on the field. So lots to talk about with my main man, my brother from another mother, Will the Thrill, the great Will the Thrill Decker. But first and foremost and always, Thriller, how we doing the last couple days? How we doing this week? Give us some good news.
It was good, man. I just saw that Leonardo DiCaprio, Paul Thomas Anderson movie. 10 out of 10. If we got any movie buffs in the comments, go see it. Just saw the early screening at the Grove in Los Angeles, man. Fantastic stuff. Check it out. And then this committee. I'm really excited to talk about this committee, man. I think a lot of good pieces aligning for UCLA on this. So if we're going to have a room full of, people that have influence and know what they're doing when it comes to picking different coaches. So I'm excited to see how this plays out.
No, indeed, Thriller. And let's go ahead and jump right into it. So the famed football search committee was formed earlier today as of Thursday night in this recording. Remember, the process here was twofold, right? We're doing a couple things in parallel here. The first is you hire the search firm, these reputed HR firms that look for these senior executives and football coaches and all these high influence folks in major organizations, both universities, athletic departments, corporations, and whatnot. So that process is going to be unfolding. But in parallel, it was announced at the time of DeShaun Foster's dismissal that a search committee was going to be formed as well and provide independent recommendations to Chancellor Julio Frank on what they believe is the future direction of UCLA football from a head coaching standpoint. And those names were announced today. And so obviously, no surprise, there's 6 members of the committee total. No surprise on the first 2. Obviously, Martin Jarman is on the committee, and then Senior Associate Athletic Director Aaron Atkins is on the committee. So those 2 individuals representing UCLA athletics. But let's call the 4 individuals that were recruited for this committee. We have the esteemed Casey Wasserman, UCLA's largest athletics donor and arguably one of the largest donors at UCLA, period. Then you have, obviously, Bob Myers, the guru who was the architect, the intellect behind the famed Golden State Warriors dynasty, of course, with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and the whole band of the Splash Brothers and whatnot. Then you have Adam Peters, currently the general manager of the Washington Commanders, who, oh, by the way, started his career as a scout with the New England Patriots, then spent 8 years as a scout as well as an executive with the Denver Broncos, and then went to the Thriller's great San Francisco 49ers and came away with 3 rings from a scout as well as from a player personnel executive standpoint. And then the 4th member of the committee, one of our great true legends at UCLA football. Exactly. On the show, Eric Kendricks. What a decorated career he had at UCLA. Really part of that core 3 years that we hang on to over the last 25 years, that 2012 to 2014 period with Brett Hundley, with Anthony Barr, with Miles Jack, the first 3 years of the Mora era, the 29 wins in 3 seasons. So these are the 4 members of the committee, Thriller. Obviously, all 4 UCLA alumni. Everyone kind of forgets, given Bob Myers' sort of Bay Area ties. Bob Myers, UCLA alum, current UC Regent, Bob Myers as well. And then, of course, Adam Peters went to UCLA from 1999 to 2001, played tight end on those late 90s and early 2000s teams. And Thriller, I'm going to hand it over to you. But what I like with this committee is a few things. One is it's small. That's number one. And I think we're getting away from this model of bureaucracy where you got to have committees on top of committees and it's all this sort of layers of individuals and so many different voices. This committee reminds me a lot of when Chip was hired. for better or for worse, when it was Casey and Troy Aikman and Dan Guerrero basically kind of got in a room and decided we're going after the famed Chip Kelly at that particular time. This has that kind of feel to it. What I really love is you got the pockets in Casey Wasserman. You got the financial element there that Wasserman brings. I think you have an understanding of how to build great sports organizations and great sports cultures that Bob Myers brings. And then I think you have the deep domain knowledge of understanding how to identify talent and how to build a football team. And I think that's what Adam Peters brings. And then in many ways, Eric Kendricks brings sort of the voice of the player. So you've got the money, you've got how to build winning organizations, you've got domain knowledge from a football strategy standpoint, and you have the voice of the player. So I think, Thriller, love to get your thoughts, and the floor is yours. But I think UCLA hit a home run in terms of putting this search committee together.
I completely agree. And for UCLA to get themselves out of this hole that they've dug themselves in, we may, depending on this game this week, we may not have a win this year. We need to assemble the UCLA version of Avengers when it comes to putting together a coaching hire. And you got them, man. You got two of our proudest alums in, Bob Myers and Adam Peters, who know how to build out a franchise. I mean, let's take a look at Bob Myers. Like, me as a Golden State Warriors diehard. I love this man. He was the guy that was mentored by Jerry West, who Laker fans equally love as much as Warrior fans do. He was the guy who pulled the trigger on getting Steve Kerr as the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. And argue with the wall. This guy is, four-time champion, just won another Olympic gold out here last summer as the head coach of Team USA. Could not be a more home run pick for hiring a head coach in Steve Kerr. And then you look at what Adam Peters has done, whether it was the development. And as a 49ers fan, I know this as well. Like, John Lynch is kind of the figurehead GM. He deals with the press. He's outspoken, very likable guy. But Peters was the guy in the back room kind of evaluating these players. I know for a fact he was the guy that identified George Kittle and Fred Warner in later rounds, who are arguably the two best at their positions. He gets the head coach or that head GM job when it comes to going to the Washington Commanders. He hires a guy in Dan Quinn last year that has the best year for the Commanders in 30 years, first year on the job.
Yeah.
But Peters, to me, as much as I love me some Bob Myers, Peters is a guy that's actually done this for a football franchise. Like, if it was the UCLA basketball search, I think Bob Myers would be great in that regard. This is a football search. So I think Peters, despite the great Bob Myers name, I think he's a little bit more undersold to the public in this. So I'm just really thrilled we have these two minds that have built sports franchises out to kind of allow UCLA to put everything in the table, all their chips in the table to try to find the best coaching candidate possible. And you mentioned Casey Wasserman, man. Literally, our practice facility is named after this guy. Deep pockets. If Casey is committed to a coach and he sees a coach he likes, I believe he's going to spend a little bit more, put a little bit more money on the table to find the right guy for UCLA, because he's a proud alumnus, man. He wants to see UCLA succeed at the highest measures. You mentioned Erica, coming in as well. I think a lot of people are kind of looking at her like, I don't know how much this adds to the mix. She's already a part of the administration. Obviously, I don't have to say this to you, Madman. The athletic department's under a lot of scrutiny right now, so they need to kind of step up on this. But adding Eric Kendricks, just a home run. I think when you think of the NFL over the last 10 years of Bruin players, Kendricks is the guy you think of, whether it was him with the, Minnesota Vikings, last year played with America's team, just a great, proud son of the UCLA fan base. So I think they knocked it out the park, and I think they got very shrewd guys and people in the process to kind of allow ourselves to pick the best candidate. And I trust a lot of these guys' opinions when it comes to what they think about with the game of football. I'll pose this question back to you, Madman.
Yep.
Is it a little weird that Aikman didn't come in on this crew? Because that's the one guy.
That's the one.
That's
the one that you sort of wonder, why that may or may not have been the case. I think it's one of those things, Thriller, where it felt like Aikman would have been that voice of the player, and then perhaps maybe Aikman said no, maybe Aikman wants to be more in the background this go around. and then sort of, be consulted with in a different form or fashion. But I did find it was very interesting. Troy Aikman is so central to what UCLA football is. That massive UCLA football quarterbacks event that took place a year and a half ago, it was Aikman and Gary Beeman on center stage. I mean, Troy Aikman is in so many ways the emblem of UCLA football, particularly the last 50 years. I agree with you. I thought it was a little interesting that Troy wasn't a part of the committee, but I can only think of it in one of two ways, Thriller. One is I think he's still going to be very involved because he has a great relationship with Casey Wasserman and the others on this committee, and he may be just taking a step back. And two is, I think there's probably an element here where, is Aikman somebody that, I don't know, the Chancellor Julio Frank thinks could possibly be the next athletic director, and maybe there's a conflict of interest, So to me, I don't want to start rumor. I don't want to start innuendo or anything like that. But, who would be a better athletic director, or at least, Thriller, a general manager of the football team in the way an Andrew Luck is for Stanford, in the way a Ron Rivera is for Cal, than the face of success in the NFL when it comes to UCLA football and Troy Aikman? I mean, if you walk in with Troy Aikman and a decorated coach side by side to any fundraising and recruiting event, there's an instant cachet and there's an instant aura. So I always believe, Thriller, and this was just my opinion, well before the DeShaun situation, well before anything else, that two guys that I would have loved to have seen as athletic directors at UCLA are just given the fundraising element to be the face to generate excitement. One was Troy Aikman, the other one was Reggie Miller. And, so to me, it's Troy Aikman. I think he wants to play a little bit more of a backseat role here for a variety of reasons, but it could also be that maybe there's a thought, at least a thought, that at some point downstream, given NIL, given how much fundraising is involved, given how much you need a face of the athletic department that people are excited about, that want to be galvanized, could Troy Aikman consider being the athletic director of UCLA?
Man, that just blew my mind. I'm going to have to evaluate that statement and what that means for so long. I kind of thought about it too with Aikman, and maybe at this point in his life, he's got a very comfy gig being the number one color analyst for ESPN Monday Night Football. Maybe he just doesn't want that pressure. I think for him, it's like, I've done the playing career. I'm always proud to be a UCLA Bruin, but I live a very comfortable life. I'm down to contribute money-wise to see what you guys want to do here. But in terms of the committee, I'm going to let you guys do your thing. And I think this occurring during football season, especially with his Monday night schedule, makes it a little bit more complicated for him. So I think that is part of the element where Kendrick's a guy who's, currently looking for a job in the NFL. I think that's a very easy guy to come and add to the coaching tree and, see how we can find the next head coach at UCLA. So
no, it makes sense, Thriller. Yeah. Let me ask you a question now. As you were breaking this down, 2 episodes ago, you and I went down our list of coaches. Now that you see the committee being formed, and I want to center in, because Casey is the money, Bob Myers is more organizational culture, Eric Kendricks is kind of the voice of the player. The real individual that I think is going to be the intellectual driver of this committee, and you alluded to it, is Adam Peters. And following Adam Peters' career, seeing the types of things that he did with the Patriots, that he did with the Broncos, that he did with your Niners, that he did with the Commanders last year, based on who's out there and who we talked about a couple of episodes ago, are you starting to lean perhaps one way or the other, just given how Adam Peters thinks, or his tendencies with decision-making, or the things that he sort of gravitates towards relative to our list from a couple episodes ago? Or are there new candidates that maybe have popped up now when you sort of understand who Adam Peters is?
I think all the guys we mentioned are going to be strongly in consideration. Maybe even Jed Fish is on the table if Casey's willing to put the money there. And just for the record, I didn't have Jed on my initial list. If he's actually in play, he's my number one choice. No questions asked. But a name came up that I think is a little under the radar when you think of NFL ties with Adam Peters and someone that's formerly coached at UCLA, Jeff Ulbrich, man. You think about the ties to this room. What was he coaching at UCLA from 2012 to 2014? The heyday of Eric Kendricks being there, it was the linebackers.
Yeah.
He wasn't even the defensive coordinator. This guy's a defensive coordinator in the NFL. He's with the Atlanta Falcons, previously with the New York Jets and Robert Saleh. Very smart defensive mind. Even with the Jets flame out last year, that defense was in the top 10 for a large portion of that year. And look at the Falcons defense this year. The offense might not be humming, but the defense has looked as good as it's looked in a long time. And Jeff Ulbrich is a big part of that. So just from the NFL ties that Peter has and knowing a lot of people in those circles, and Eric Kendricks, literal position coach, being available, I think that's a name we have to throw out, given he was the coach here in Westwood for a few years. What do you think about Ulbrich, man?
No, Ulbrich is a great name, Thriller. And, you said it best. When you talk about the NFL pedigree and then also understanding UCLA and having that experience, because ultimately recruiting is a game. As much as we, as fans of the university or alums or folks that host shows or are content creators and care very deeply about the university, let's not kid ourselves. These kids, sure, they're going to love their time at a UCLA. They're going to love their time at a Georgia, LSU, so on and so forth. But their ultimate aspiration is to get to the NFL. And so if you have a coach that can say, not only was I there, not only was I successful at the highest level in the NFL, not only do I understand how to get you there, that's the piece that I think will really resonate in a significant way. And Thriller, I completely agree with you. I love that name. I think it's going to be sort of added to the mix. For some reason, I'm starting to think more of a defensive background, when you think about Peters, right? Like, I think he's leaning, if you think about the decisions that he's made over the course of his career with Dan Quinn, you go back with the Niners, you talked about the some of the lineage and the decision-making. I get the sense that he may be leaning someone with a heavier defensive background, and particularly as you think about the Big Ten. So it may be, I love Fish. You and I both, I agree with you. If he's in play, me, he's the number one. He's the number one candidate. I had him in my top 5, but with the caveat, are they going to be able to pay the $11 million buyout? Are they willing? And so Fish is number one, but I'm starting to sort of also gravitate towards Tony White and some of the others folks that have more of a defensive background as a result of Peters. But we'll see how it shakes out. Bottom line is, over the course of the next few weeks, they've hit a home run with this committee. It's small, it's powerful, it's diverse, and it has the expertise that we need to be able to get the job done.
And I got a question back for you. Last thing we'll talk about this, Coach, at least for this episode. We have Wasserman officially now on the committee. We talked about it last week. What's the buyout? How much is too much for a buyout situation? What number would you think is kind of like the Mendoza line, where you just can't go over that number, no matter how good the coaching candidate, maybe how interested he is? What is that number for a buyout perspective? Because to me, I think it's jumped. I think it's a $15 million situation. If it exceeds $15 million, I don't think we're going to touch it. But I do think with Wasserman being so front and center here and how much he's committed to this process, that our buyout line definitely jumps significantly with this.
No, I think that's spot on, Thriller. I think it's going to come down also to the chancellor. And because this committee is going to make a recommendation, right? And they're meant to be this independent committee. I think Wasserman, we know Wasserman's history. If he likes someone, he will pay. And no one loves UCLA more than Casey Wasserman. I mean, folks that drive down Wilshire and Westwood, right before you sort of get into Westwood Village, you see that big, tall, white UCLA Health building. And then right next to it, that tower that says Wasserman with the orange W. I mean, he literally is the Bruce Wayne of UCLA and Westwood and Beverly Hills. I mean, right down to sort of the W, hovering over the campus, sort of a financial angel, if you will, for UCLA. So I think Casey would be ready. I agree with you. If it goes to 10, 12, 15, I think Casey would be ready to do it. The question for me is going to be, how is the chancellor going to potentially sell that to the regents when ultimately it needs to be approved because of the financial history of the athletic department? When we talk about $200 million plus deficit over the last 6-7 years. The primary driver of that was dead money to coaches. And now the university has spent the money to get the athletic department out of the debt. They've made the athletic department whole. And now the moment you're whole, the first thing you're going to do is pay 15 to 20 million of more dead money on top of, the 7.5 that you pay for DeShaun. So to me, that's the question. But again, all of these topics are so interrelated, because if you're truly all in on football, you'll go make that sell. You'll go make that case and say, this is why we have to do this, because football is a priority at UCLA and it takes money to make money. And football is such a moneymaker, both directly for the athletic department, but also the implications when it comes to fundraising for the rest of the university.
Yeah, and if Casey Wasserman truly is the Batman of this, the bat signal is up right now. We need his help. And here's my kind of spin on it. Is it really the university's money if Wasserman fronts it himself, going like, I'll pay for it?
Yeah,
Like,
it's a fair point. Yeah, it's a fair point.
I mean, that guy, CAA is like insanely wealthy as an agency, and his family has run that, throughout the years. And this guy is one of the richest people in the world, not even just like, within the city of LA, like the world. So if he wants it, there's a scenario where we can make it happen. So
absolutely, no question about it. And I agree with you, Thriller. I think if you can bring Casey the right candidate, I think he's willing to go 10, 12, 13 million. I do think if we start getting into like the 20 range, that might be a little crazy. But I think, hey, look, Jetfish's buyout is 11, and that's going to be posed. Jetfish's buyout is $11 million. Now, the question is, does Jetfish want to come to UCLA? I still think he wants to come to UCLA, and he's got Damon Williams. He's got, now maybe that changes if Washington upsets Ohio State on Saturday, Thriller, and they got a 22-game home winning streak. But Fish wanted to go to UCLA so badly that I feel like if there was a competitive offer on the table in terms of his buyout, but also on a per-year basis, that will be someone that I think you and I both just think the world of. So fascinating to sort of think about, and we'll sort of have it all for you here on LAFB Network as things break and materialize. I have a feeling, Thriller, they're going to keep things very close to the vest, but things will leak, things will sort of pop out, and if and when we do, we'll let our viewers know as always. Your closing thoughts on the committee piece.
My closing thoughts is we're all Ohio State fans this weekend. That's what I We are all collectively Ohio State fans this weekend. So go Huskies. All right, go Buckeyes. Let's get the Huskies off the field, and maybe Fish, we got a shot at him. So that's all I got to say about that.
There we go. Well, Thriller, this is a perfect segue, as always. So we're hoping Washington loses, and we're also hoping Northwestern loses, on Saturday as well. And very interesting matchup here. Bruins 0-3 coming into, the great state of Illinois to take on the Northwestern Wildcats, who come in 1-2. And this is a tale of two programs that are struggling. This is Tim Skipper's debut. He talked about the last 2 weeks really being a reset. The first week of the bye being almost training camp, and then this past week being really week 0 and week 1 of the season. As we sort of try and reset the page here. Northwestern comes in, Thriller, 1-2. Very interesting schedule. They got plastered by Tulane, 23-3. Then they ended up winning against Western Illinois. And then they were down 34-0 to Oregon in a rainy condition game. Got a couple garbage touchdowns there. Truthfully, Oregon seemed pretty disinterested by the end of the third quarter of that game. Ended up losing 34-14. So Northwestern comes into this game, Thriller, having scored under 60 points in the first 3 games of the season. So they're at under 20 points a game. We know UCLA, given the shortcomings in terms of these lopsided scores the first 3 weeks, are coming in under 15 points a game. So conventional wisdom would say this is going to be a pretty low-scoring game. And when you think about Northwestern losing their star running back at the beginning of the season, Cam Porter, now they're sort of relying on their backup, Caleb Komufulele, and then you've got their quarterback situation with Preston Stone, who comes in 540 yards throwing, 3 touchdowns against 6 interceptions. The 6 interceptions were against Tulane and Oregon, all 6. And then all 3 touchdowns were against Western Illinois. So he's coming in kind of struggling with some confidence. But what's interesting, Thriller, is Preston Stone was the quarterback of SMU in 2023 when they went 9-3. So he's capable of leading a team to a significant amount of victories. And so is this potentially a bounce back game for him, or is he going to continue to struggle? I expect Northwestern to sort of pound the football with, a litany of running backs. They like to throw it to their running backs out of the backfield as well. And it's a very sort of short, controlled passing game. And then on the defensive side, Thriller, with Northwestern, they themselves only have 3 sacks through 3 games. And so how are they going to be able to win the line of scrimmage? But this is 2 teams right now struggling to find a win. Both desperately need a win. So it should be a very competitive game. I imagine this to be a lower scoring game, just given the time, the ability for UCLA to travel cross-country, first cross-country trip, obviously 2 games at the Rose Bowl, 1 trip to Las Vegas, first cross-country trip for UCLA. So it should be very interesting. I anticipate this being a close, low-scoring game. Your thoughts, Thriller, on Northwestern?
Yeah, Northwestern, I think, is the one chance we have within Big Ten play as it's currently constructed. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this is the only game I think we can win, if I'm being frankly honest. So if we can get out there and make plays for Coach Skipper in his debut for UCLA, I think this would be huge. Skipper is mostly a defensive mind. So I think people, when, we dismissed Ilkaika Malloy, he's no longer on the coaching staff. It's kind of like hey, man, where's our defensive coordinator? Tim Skipper is that. Under Jim McElwain at Florida, he was a defensive coordinator back there for the 2015 season, did some stuff throughout the years at Fresno State, Central Michigan, things of that nature. So we got a defense. You talked about it, man. Preston Stone had a really good 2023 and then lost the battle last year to Jennings at SMU, trying to find his footing, essentially, when it comes to what he's doing at Northwestern. Has doubled the amount of interceptions to touchdowns. So just not an ideal start for him. The defense isn't that bad. That's my one thing I can hang my hat on with David Braun and this Northwestern team, is they're 53rd in total defense right now. And yeah, Oregon may have looked disinterested, but if you look at the previous 2 games, they scored 59 points and 69 in their first 2.
Yeah.
And then only
34.
So I thought that was a really nice step up for them. I hate to say it. I think Dante Moore is like a legitimate Heisman candidate. They played the best defense of anybody against, Dante and the Ducks thus far. So I give them a lot of credit there. The offense, though, is kind of where they fall off. They're 113th in total offense. UCLA not really better in that category. We're 130th right now. But if we find a way to make stops for an offense that just hasn't been able to move the football consistently, this allows us to have a shot. And I think we all agree Nico is talented. He just needs to find some footing. So maybe, with an extra week to prepare for this game, we come out with a better offensive plan. Maybe we run the football. I mean, you've asked me each week what I want to see. I am ready to see the Jet come out of the backfield and make some plays with the tailback. He is a good running back, man. So I hope to see him getting some carries out there. Let's see Quasi get in, man. We talked about Bolitnikov. I still want to see the potential. It may not be with UCLA next year, given where the program's headed, but I'd love to see him make some core UCLA memories moving forward, at least for the rest of this year. So I want to see those guys ball out. And if Nico can string together like 3 or 4 good drives throughout the game, where we come away with either a field goal or a touchdown, I think we're going to have a shot in this football game. So, Nico, it's on you. I'm looking at, our new offensive coordinator who came from the Cignetti system. And by the way, Indiana, what a victory over Illinois last week. Cignetti and company are going to be back in the college football playoff if they have their way once again. But it's a winnable game, and I hope UCLA rises to the occasion. I saw clips of Tim Skipper this week coaching up the guys in practice, and they were walking out to practice. He goes, "Hey, winners get to walk out to practice. You guys sprint out to practice." I thought it was a great quote that he had to try to motivate the kids. So Skipper's been looking good, and I hope UCLA follows foot with how good the guys looked.
No, absolutely, Thriller. Such a great breakdown there. I love the energy that Tim Skipper is bringing to this team and a vibrancy. And, he's loosening it up as well. Guys are playing music in the locker room. They went bowling earlier this week. And he said, look, don't get me wrong. I'm grinding over here but these guys also kind of need a break and realize this is meant to be fun as well. And it's just been such a hard start to the season. Will, you bring up a really good point about Northwestern, particularly in that Oregon game. And while weather had a lot to, I think, do with Oregon's kind of lack of explosiveness, the one thing that was very evident is that Northwestern doesn't beat themselves situationally. And when you talk about defensively in particular, yeah, it's not a big sack year, to my earlier point. It's not a big interception year. They're not going to make huge plays on really either side of the ball, but they're not going to beat themselves. Very rarely are you going to see them lose gap contain. Very rarely are you going to see them have a series of penalties or mental mistakes. And so that is sort of Northwestern football through and through. Defensively, they're situationally more often than not in the right place. Sometimes in these 1v1 matchups, they'll lose because of athleticism and talent, but they're not going to necessarily get out-schemed. And I think they're going to come in with a really good game plan against UCLA's offense. UCLA is going to have to run the ball, Thriller, to your point, so folks just don't tee off on Nico. And I think it's going to be quite the chess match. But I think ultimately the game is going to come down to the other side of the ball. I think this Northwestern offense against this UCLA defense, who is going to come out on top there? Because if you say, who's the primary culprit for Northwestern's 1-2 start, and who is the primary culprit for UCLA's 0-3 start, I think you would say for Northwestern, it's offense. And for UCLA, you would say it's defense. And so which of those two units has made some strides, has made a jump, made an improvement? And I think whoever wins that side of the ball, ultimately, Thriller, is going to come out on top and win this game. Your thoughts, any sort of score prediction on what you're thinking we're going to see Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I'm predicting UCLA to win this one. I think we're going to win 21-20. And the lone Big Ten selection, Mateen Bagani, is going to put in a last-second field goal to win the game for UCLA. So my mouth to God's ears, as you often say, I'm hoping that's the case. It's one of these games where it is winnable, despite our start, despite the setbacks we've had this season. So I'm looking to see the toughness, the blue and gold that bleeds from these players, just for pride purposes, to come out there and play a hell of a game. So I got UCLA winning 21-20.
I love it, Thriller. Fantastic. And you said it best. Look, at the start of the season, we said this was right there with, it's hard to say now, with UNLV, with New Mexico. This game, Maryland's looking really good. We talked about it offline, Thriller. That's going to be a much more difficult game over the course of this season than we thought at the beginning of the season, particularly with how they looked at Wisconsin is sort of a dumpster fire right now, but they went into Madison and won convincingly. That was a statement that Maryland is really looking for bowl eligibility this year. They got a really nice young quarterback, and I think they're on the upswing here. So this is the winnable game. And if you can get one and you start getting habits, Tim Skipper can say, look, I'm 1-0. I'm 1-0. We're starting fresh. And you go from there. Thriller, I have a similar narrative to you, slightly different score. I think we're going to mirror the Hawaii game from last year, 16-13. UCLA beats Northwestern. It's going to be a lot of field goals. It's going to be tough to move the ball up and down. The team that makes fewer mistakes is going to win. UCLA wins 16-13 on a walk-off Bugatti Bagani kick, 50-yard walk-off. Bruins walk off Northwestern. First win of the season. First win in the Big Ten. And we'll have a special Sunday afternoon session of having the first victory in 2025. Well, Thriller, another great one in the books. It's always such a pleasure. We talk search committee. We talk the game. And folks, before we sign off, we, of course, have to pay the bills. You see the beautiful sleeper ad below us here. Really go ahead and use this sleeper app. Use the promo code UCLA LAFB because you get $100 off and a $100 match bonus on the first $100 that you use. So if you bet 100, you get 200 right off the bat. Sleeper, here's a little secret about the Sleeper app. It's more than just a platform for season-long fantasy leagues. Millions of users this year enjoyed playing fantasy sports on Sleeper, but the app offers so much more. Live stats, news feed, and a real-time chat where you get to engage with other users about individual plays and performances during the NFL and NBA seasons. Download the #1 sports app today and experience it for yourself, and tell them the guys from the LAFB network sent you, and use that promo code UCLA LAFB. Well, folks, Thriller and the Madman got you covered. Post-game, we're going to get Wayne on here, get some of his thoughts on the program. We haven't had Wayne on for a couple of weeks, get his thoughts on where things are going with this search committee. And Thriller and I got a couple of interesting topics to be going back and forth on in the days and weeks to come. So stay tuned for all of that. And as always, brighter days ahead for UCLA football. Be loud, be proud, be passionate Bruins always, and 4's up forever.